Welcome to Dynasty Self-Help, a podcast helping you self-actualize in the hobby of Dynasty Fantasy Football, a show where the first rule of Hot Cushion is don't ask why the cushion is hot. I'm Kyle LaPointe, downloading my thoughts to you from Fort Worth, Texas, and joining us from State College, Pennsylvania is my co-host, Jeremy Schwob. How are you now?
I am doing well. The guys' weekend continues. Monty and I went on a bunch of walks today, and now it's cold. And for those of you who know, I podcast outside, so this is going to be interesting here as the winter approaches quickly. Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. Oof. All right. I watched that show like way late and just kind of binged it. It was pretty fun. I think I'm glad I did that because otherwise that was pretty slow moving, and I don't think I could have, made it through multiple years of that. But we are going to do something different. Speaking of crazy TV shows that we shouldn't be talking about. This is going to be different than our article and guest-driven shows. We're going to talk about some questions that we asked our listeners for that were based on a specific topic. So we're going to read these questions and do our best to answer, but we'll do a little bit more than that, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. We don't have a guest today, as you mentioned, but we do have a guest. The guest is all of you that are listening and contributing to this and going through your own kind of psychological journey, and we're excited to do our first iteration of this. And we won't have a hot cushion today, so we won't need to ask why it's hot, but we may do an exercise later on just for Kyle. So we'll see.
I am old and overweight, so I need all the exercise I can get. So let me go ahead and roll over here to the Dynasty Self-Help tweet that was originally rolled out, and I want to read this. It says we're going to do a listener episode, so we want to get psychological with your Dynasty concerns. So what are some of the things that you're having difficulty with as a Dynasty owner? So e.g. players, roster construction, trade considerations, value shifts, depth chart changes, injury impacts, etc. And we got a few responses, and I really liked several of them. Not yours, but I liked everybody else's.
And before you jump into what those responses are, I think we're going to take this listener question episode a little bit differently than maybe other pods will do, where they'll just kind of read it and give their answer. We do want to provide an answer to the people that took the time to ask us questions and provide their concerns. But I think we want to have two other kind of main goals. We want to try and broaden this to other players, other related issues, really to get at the common themes that may be there. And then really most importantly, particularly for our show, is to look at what kind of psychological things are underlying for you, the listener, that are asking these questions.
No, and I like that. Just like we do on regular shows, we use players and current events as examples, but that's not really the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. We're not trying to be something where you're going to be able to take this away and use it this week. We're hoping you can use this in your toolbox to get better as a fantasy owner for many years to come.
Yeah, and we're trying to keep it as therapeutic as possible, which we've talked about the misconception of therapy where people come in and think that they're coming for advice, and they'll ask the therapist for advice, and that's not really what we do. Because that doesn't help them improve in their daily life. It only provides a scapegoat to either hold up as the one who has all the answers, or to criticize for telling them to do the wrong thing, and that doesn't help anyone.
But you can prescribe us medicine if it doesn't work, right?
Nope.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and roll into our first question. I love that we got a whole new nope. Like that might have been as clean as the first one. Joe Memmolo Jr. So one of the guys we play with in Clash of the Channels. And so that's at DFF_Joe Mem. And he does some pretty cool stuff, so you should follow him anyway.
Yes.
But his statement to us was off-season trades that I regret. Sat through the entire Sunday night game thinking how good my team would be if I didn't trade Zeke for Miles Sanders and picks that aren't until next year. So it hurts more considering there's already an injury to Sanders. So this is an interesting question, right? So he's saying he watched Zeke play really well while Sanders was sitting on the pine because he
And
was
that was week one, just for
week
clarification.
one. Yep. So, let's just take this and
Mhm.
unpack it a little bit. We're talking about specific, like 2 stars, and he went one side with 1 star, and 1 star that he ended up getting in return didn't play. And so he's expecting an instant return from the star, and he didn't get it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that this broadens out a little bit to just kind of being all of us being prone to quick reactions right now. We have been waiting for this week one probably more than any week one in history
True.
of week ones. We talked about this kind of reaction to any real football or semblance of real football in our psychology of training camp episode a couple back, and I think it's just important to realize that this is a super small sample size, that it's 1 week, that, Miles Sanders is now back and fine. And we just want to kind of make sure that, we're taking this the right way and that we're thinking of this as more of a process, review or analysis rather than an outcomes review or analysis. Because as we suggested in our psychology of training camp episode, try and flip it and see if your reaction would be as strong, if the outcome was different. So if Zeke was the one who was banged up and Miles Sanders had a good first week, you'd be over the moon. And so we want to make sure that it's, we're not reacting to the trade being a bad decision, and more so just a, kind of an unlucky outcome here 1 week in out of the many weeks we have left.
I think anytime you talk about a trade of that nature, you're talking about a top 5, 6 running back that's pretty much guaranteed. Like everybody thinks maybe Ezekiel Elliott's a top 5 running back. There's not a lot of argument there. And Miles Sanders, there may be some people who are doubters, but definitely going to be a top 12 running back.
There's not a lot of argument over Miles Sanders between a conversation of me and Justin Toth.
Right. There's a lot of people who have Miles Sanders pretty much neck and neck with Ezekiel Elliott. So getting Miles Sanders and some extra capital back is a positive move if you really believe in Miles Sanders. But, you got an injury. They didn't replace the guy. They didn't put anybody on, they didn't pull anybody into the team to add extra players. They didn't sign a veteran to the team to a long-term deal. We sometimes have to stop and unpack that 1 week is just 1 week. And what would have happened? So like you said, Jeremy, what would have happened if Miles Sanders was totally healthy, had a strong game, and Elliott was the one who was hurt? Probably looking at that trade as, man, I killed it. I got extra on top of Sanders. Or what happens?
Go ahead.
I was just saying, what happens if you have that same situation and now you've got Miles Sanders and you had the offer and you didn't pull the trigger? What do you think about that? The same situation. Elliott's hurt, Sanders is there and healthy, but you didn't pull the trigger and you have Elliott still, and he was the one who was hurt. Would you be regretting that decision you didn't make?
Yeah, it depends on what you view. I think that you're actually probably more likely to have kind of a strong reaction one way or the other if you did make a trade. In this case, you made the trade, Joe, and because of that, you're going to have a reaction one way or another watching these two players. If you didn't make a trade, you probably wouldn't pay attention as much to Miles Sanders, and a Zeke injury may have just kind of felt like, 1 week he'll be back the next week and it's fine.
Yeah, it's not related to the trade, right? And I like what you said there.
Yeah, and I think one last comment before we pull in some other questions. I think that, again, go back to the process of the trade. At the time, what was the goal of that trade? It was likely to get a few years younger at the position without losing a lot of current production and stack a couple picks in the future as well. And so this was a long-term play anyway, without hopefully losing a ton in the short term. And so, sure, you lost a little bit, or you lost a chunk week one, and that may have caused a matchup to not go your way, but this was a long-term play. And, it seems like if that's, that was your mindset, that you're still in good shape with that long-term plan.
And what if you don't really love Sanders? You just did it because of the value of the extra picks. Well, lots of people still love Sanders, so you can probably trade Sanders from that. You probably can't get Elliott back, but you might be able to get a Kamara, and you might still be able to plus the trade if you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say one thing going forward for Joe is check in on this trade every 4 weeks this season, and just write down, maybe a sentence about what your reaction is, whether it be a tweet to us on this thread or in a DM, or just, personally on a notepad or something. And just track what it's like, looking back and reflecting on this trade throughout the season. And then, going into maybe next off season, a year after the 1 year anniversary of the trade, and see where you're at with things as well. And just see those data points over time and see what it looks like for you.
I like that. We got another question that might be of similar vein. I'm going to go ahead and read this one, and it's from Jared Linden, at Jared Linden, and that's Jared, JaredLindden. So he is a buddy of Jared's, plays in some safe leagues with him. And his question is, how do I see through the noise of week-to-week volatility and process the new information without over or underreacting to find the true signal for effective decision-making? Big question there. There's a lot to unpack.
That's a big brain question there, Jared. It's that's what we're trying to do here, kind of, right? It's, if we had the magic answer to that, then, we wouldn't give it to you, because then I wouldn't beat you. But, right. But no, I mean, this is what we're all trying to do right now. And it's tough, especially when, like we were saying, we're starved for football. But I think what I said earlier, in one of the comments that I made to Joe was, particularly when you make a decision, that's kind of going to trigger you even more to have some of these volatile or these reactions or underreactions to volatility. If you made a decision, you could have Joe's reaction where he's, frustrated at the trade. You could also have, an underreaction and say, Miles Sanders is going to be fine. I, was doing that because, I think he's going to be better long-term. And what if that hamstring injury lingers for another 6 weeks, which it's probably not going to, but you can see where that underreaction comes in. And I think, again, I'll just direct Jared in this case, in the first part of his question, to, making process-oriented decisions and sticking to those. And it's like reading and living and dying by training camp videos, by tweets, updates. Just, collect the information and don't make your gut reactions. Just store it and decide if this is, just another data point, or if this is going to be some sort of, profile altering, data point that you need to act on right now. And I would say that that's a very rare instance.
So, I think, I read some into that as well. And the question kind of is, I want to be on the leading edge, right? Like I want to be the one to make the trade offer that only cost me a second. And I want to be the guy that sells this guy for a first right before he drops off the face of the earth. And the answer to that in general is, it's like the weatherman prediction thing. You're only going to be accurate to that kind of a detail, 30, 20, maybe 25% of the time. It's your chances of being that right are so slim that even if you're well-versed and you're great and at this hobby of ours, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to swing and miss more than you swing and hit. So don't be too down on yourself, and make sure that you follow a process that allows you to make those decisions more times than not, because that's what you're aiming for.
Yeah. And I want to bring in kind of a metaphor to this, in that it's kind of like watching the games on Sunday, or watching Red Zone even. When you see every game and every scoring play and all that and all the updates, it's easy to have, these reactions to, oh, like things are going great, or things are like, I'm not getting a lot of updates through the first quarter. I'm seeing all these other guys score, and, I'm feeling like shit because of it. But if you just zoom out, like all you're going to need to know is what's the outcome of the game, what's the outcome of the players.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't matter whether they score them in the first quarter or the second quarter or the fourth quarter. Um, like, game script and that stuff is important, but in terms of your emotional reaction, like, are you making live trades in the first quarter? Like, no. So why are you making, trades after just 1 week? If we're paralleling, the in game versus the end of the game to 1 week versus the whole season. Like, let's not overreact to a small data point in the grand scheme of things.
Well, and let's do a little stock market analogy, right? Are you a day trader or are you going to buy some mutual funds? And we're dynasty players, so more of us are buying mutual funds than day trading. But if day trading's your thing, trade them in the first quarter, right? I mean, if that's fun for you, do it. But the answer of like, is there just a perfect way to do this? It's really repetition, right? I mean, let's get in there and do our process over and over and over and make sure we
Yep.
don't jump out of our comfort zone for some silly reason, like I do way too many times,
Yep.
and make a foolish move.
And stop the stock market analogy there and
I
don't
will.
extend it to value.
No, no, because value exists. So I'm going to ask the second question from Jared: how to be real with yourself and know when to undergo a roster rebuild. And he said, I personally think people throw in the towel too early and too often, but maybe that's just anecdotal. So, I really, this question kind of popped up in my head in the middle of the first week. And so I really appreciate that, Jared, you brought this to our attention. But I said the same thing. I've got a team that last year was not expected to compete because of the way I built my first season draft, and it was better than it was supposed to be. And then because I had so many amassed picks this year, I should be better instantly, right? Well, I lost week one. I was probably ninth or 10th, and like I was way at the bottom. I would have lost to almost every team I played. But that gut reaction of, do I throw in the towel now? I know deep down, I know because I built that roster that it's only going to get better and it's strong right now, but I had a bad week. And it's really easy for us to look at that bad week, and especially when our sample size is no preseason and only 1 week, to focus on that 1 week as some sort of a way to expand on the rest of the year. And it is a data point. It is not a data curve. So
Yeah.
we have to look at it like that.
Yeah. I would, I think with all of this, everything in our show, we want to, um, make sure that you're being honest with yourself. And so, honesty is on a spectrum. You don't want to be, too brutally honest where it becomes, you know, self-deprecating and it goes too far beyond where you want to be. Cause then you're not being honest, and level with yourself. And then you of course don't want to ignore things. But I think that, it's really important to maybe define a cutoff for yourself of, if this season doesn't go very well and you're going to rebuild, when is that going to happen?
Mhm.
Regardless of what happened week one, like this might be you can still do it now, but this might be a good exercise to do leading into each season, is say, okay, if things don't, end up how I'm hoping for and I'm projecting toward, when do I maybe start selling off my running backs on second contracts? When do I start, looking toward picks or, rookies that are underperforming and trying to buy them low? If that's, hopefully that's not week one, and that's what we're trying to kind of work against. Maybe that's week 6. You have an idea of where you're sitting. You have to run the table to make the playoffs, things like that. I think are still early enough to where you have an idea of how your team's going to look without it being too late where everyone's trying to do the same thing. Not, when it gets to your week 8, week 9, things like that, it might start to get too late because there's other teams that are confident that they're throwing in the towel as well.
Well, and I kind of like what you said there, Jeremy, and I think that these two questions
You only kind of like it?
I kind of like it. I want to throw something that I kind of don't like, but no, these two questions, maybe they're more related than they originally seemed to, with him asking about the week and week volatility, and then also asking about when do you throw in the towel, and maybe that's his team, maybe that's some other team, but like what you were talking about with your answers there kind of brought something else into focus for me, and that is that you want to be a week earlier than everybody else, and maybe everybody's trading and you miss the opportunity, but maybe you just don't get the value. Maybe you just don't quite get as much as you could have gotten had you done it 2 weeks ago. And so I kind of like to look at that as, if you're a little late to the show, you don't always miss out 100%. Sometimes you just don't quite get the top of the rung. So you didn't get that first trade that you watch go through and you go, oh, I wish I would have offered that guy. I would have totally paid more for the guy that just got picked up, and you're never going to be perfect in every one of these scenarios. So that's what I'm looking at.
Sure. I'll add one thing and then we'll move on, that as I preach, value is perception. And so who cares if you lost, a third worth of value, or a guy that's around later in terms of startup, or, some amount of points lower in a trade calculator. Like, in the end, get the players that fit your process as best you can. And, you're not really missing out, and, you're missing out on maybe additional bullets or additional, ping pong balls at what you're trying to do, which is fine. You want those, certainly, if they're attainable and free, but that doesn't mean that you're losing some sort of quantifiable thing as much as it seems. It's, is 2 third-round picks always better than 1 third-round pick? No, it's what you do with those picks and using them to their process. If I make a selection, or if you make a selection versus, someone playing their first Dynasty league and they have 3 third-rounders, like, you might still make the better selection than any of their 3 picks. Who knows? But, it's less about value and it's more about your process.
I like it. Okay, we're going to move on to our next question, which is from BennyB at Ben Boulon. So I believe I pronounced that right, and I can only assume that I did. It's at BenBoulan. How long in a keeper league do you hang on to the guys with potential but have bad landing spots and are maybe injured? Mims. I'm talking about Mims. Consuming a roster spot, but he's unlikely to contribute.
Yeah, I think this is a good one, because I'm sure it's broadening out to a lot of players. There's, the Debo hype train was flowing because he started off nicely last year, and now you kind of got to wait on him. I'm still a younger guy with Rashad Penny, and I'm still a truther there for him and think that he can play if he gets a shot, but these guys are just kind of burning holes on your roster. And so to me, broadening this out is really asking how it's affecting your overall roster construction.
Yeah.
And or really ask yourself, can I survive this guy not contributing, or can I survive this not being a hit at all? And I think as long as you can say that it's, maybe not impacting your overall roster construction, and that you can survive this guy, everything not hinging on this guy's performance or this guy contributing at some point during the year, then ride it out if you feel comfortable with that and you want that. I think that I can, I mentioned the players that I like and how my teams are built. I can roster and sit, live or die with Corey Davis and N'Keal Harry and these guys, because they, one, fit my process, and two, they're not impacting my overall roster construction necessarily, because they're typically my 7th, 8th receiver. And I keep building and churning the back end of that with guys that fit my process and take shots elsewhere. And so if they don't hit, then it's okay. That, I have the depth in front of them and the strength in front of them, to where it's not gonna crush me if they don't hit.
Well, and I like that. Like you just talked about, it depends, right?
You
If
like that, or you
Mims,
kind of like that?
this one I like all the way.
Oh, okay.
Mims is, if he was drafted on your team to be your fourth wide receiver or third wide receiver, like Jeremy said, that could be problematic. You were expecting an early playing time situation over there, and it turns out Sam Darnold can't throw more than 2 yards per play, so you end up in a situation that now you're worried about him. Yeah, that can be a problem if you're trying to win right now and your roster construction was based on having that player be a contributor right now. But Mims is a specific example of a bigger picture item in that most wide receivers do not produce much in their first year. You hope to get a little bit in their second year. Maybe they flash enough during the first year where they go up in value. That's been a newer fangled thing to happen. But overall, you shouldn't be expecting that player to do much. So if you already made the decision for him to be on your roster, it should have been part of your process prior to this for you to know that it's possible I got to sit on him for 2 years before he's worth anything. And if you didn't do that, it's okay. It's not the problem. It's not the end of the world. You can get value for him. I tell you, I'll trade you for him right now. I love Mims. I think Mims is awesome, but at the same time, you don't need to sell him. You don't need to dump him. You don't need to give up on him unless you're in a redraft league where you might need the roster spot. And sometimes you just have to churn those guys that with high upside, because that's the redraft philosophy.
Yeah, and one more thing to close this out is you said guys with potential but have bad landing spots and are injured. Let's just remind ourselves that we don't know everything. We don't have all the data. Particularly on an injury, we know half the story probably. We don't know what his recovery is like. We don't know what his scans and MRIs and all that stuff looks like. We don't know how he's responding on a day-to-day basis. And then bad landing spots, we don't know if they're bad landing spots. Like, sure, it looks terrible right now, but is he going to have, all this volume in the second half of the season when he's fully healthy and just light it up with, 12, 15 targets a game? We don't know. And typically bad landing spots sometimes turn into decent fantasy landing spots.
Mm-hmm.
Like AJ Brown last year was in a bad kind of landing spot.
Right.
We thought that, while the Cowboys offense is a great landing spot, it's a crowded depth chart. And so it's like, was that the best place for CeeDee Lamb to go? I don't know. It was interesting at the very least. It wasn't where people kind of necessarily wanted him to go, other than you. But we just don't know until it kind of happens. That doesn't mean we don't do anything about it, but I think it means we temper our reaction that we feel like we do know. We do know what a bad landing spot is. We do know what a good landing spot is, because we don't.
So the bottom line is bad landing spot, good landing spot. You hold on to Mims because he's Mims, right? I think that's pretty much what we both agree to. So next question is from Zach Glicksman. That's at DFF_Z-Train. And he says, how to value Nick Chubb accurately? Seems to be his value will be tied to game script. Is there a New York Giants player outside of Saquon that you're excited about having in your starting lineup? I think he's got multiple questions here, and I'm reading them all. And then
that works.
Is Will Fuller a buy, sell, hold? So he's asking several different questions here. Some of them we can unpack one at a time. The first one, Nick Chubb.
Start with Chubb. Yeah. So as a qualifier, this question was asked before the Week 2 Thursday night game where he blew up against Cincinnati.
He didn't look that good. You should probably trade him to me in the Dynasty 289 league that we play in.
That's literally what you told me right before the game happened, and obviously I wasn't going to sell him to you. But
if
anyway.
I would have offered you Penny before the game, straight up, Would it even have intrigued you? Like, would it
I did
intrigue you?
no,
Okay.
no. I was not panicking on Nick Chubb
See,
after week one.
it's exactly what we were talking
Not
about in multiple
panicking
of
on
these
a
questions.
second round dynasty startup pick
But
after
that's some
5 point
of these
performance.
questions that are being asked here,
Right.
right?
No,
Like,
totally. I agree. And it's not, you're not wrong for having the reaction. It's just that, let's take it, let's strip out the names a little bit and go for, okay. So this was a running back who was, a second, maybe third round dynasty startup pick if he fell that far. Maybe even snuck into the first before kind of Hunt re-signed and stuff. But he, he led the league in rushing last year. And then this running back had competition added and extended in this case, and then had a bad performance in 1 week. So that's kind of like the stripped away variables to a degree. And we need to think about what of those pieces is important. Maybe all of it, but what's the most important aspect of it? To me, it's that this guy is a legit talent that led the league in rushing last year. It's less about the competition that's added as his backup or a week one performance.
well, and I like what you're saying there. The concept of it being not just the name, right? Let's talk about the general idea of the player, where he
You
is,
try and do
where he
that
fits.
anyway.
Right. And that right there helps you so much in the idea, because what I was talking about earlier, I offered up in joking manner, a name of a player that I knew Jeremy loved that's sitting on IR, but he loves the guy, and maybe he's trepid over what's going on with this one player that he got in a trade that he didn't have high enough to get in the draft. He got him in a trade. So, like, do these
Thank
things
you, John
impact the
Dar.
player? Oh yeah. Well, John just pretty much handed him to you on a silver platter. Thanks to Left. But we've got a situation now where, okay, maybe you can overreact because you don't have that love for the player and you start to freak out about it. And the real key and truth of this situation is that it's these recency issues that are occurring, because I think the most recent thing with no football being watched in most people's mind was right before that first game, his backup or his alternate player at the same position got a brand new contract and it was pretty healthy. And then he comes out and lays a turd. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh gosh, is he terrible?
Right.
No,
Well,
they have like probably the best tandem of backs in the entire league.
Yeah.
Those two are amazing.
Right. Yeah, and even sticking within that same game with like Joe Mixon, who also got his big contract, different. It's like contract for the starter rather than the backup or 1B or 1A or whatever. I always get that mixed up.
Right.
But then he doesn't get hardly any of the passing work because Gio Bernard's out there the whole night. And it's like, well, so does that mean that Joe Mixon's never going to get the passing work and they're going to keep running out Bernard? I hope not, if Zach Taylor wants to keep a job. But
I know. Well, I mean, you look at the success rate of what Joe Mixon has done in the past, and it's high and it's strong. So
yeah,
you mentioned it earlier. Maybe there's an injury and we don't know about it. Like there's so many factors in there that we don't understand.
Sure. Yeah. So just strip the name away. Think about the kind of profile type variables or the think about all these things without your kind of biased attachments. Not that the biases are bad or that because you own him you're worried about him. I think we value Nick Chubb accurately by looking at the profile and statistics of Nick Chubb without reacting to 1 week.
Right. And
all right, so let's talk about
let's talk would be the New York
Saquon. Yep.
Yes, New York Giants player outside of Saquon that we're excited to have in the starting lineup. I got lots of them. I mean,
Oh, good, because I have 0 of them.
It's like I've got Darius Slayton in a few spots, and when you hit on a guy that's a late rounder, it's kind of fun to have him in your lineup. Am I expecting him to do well? I'm really hoping he's my latest and last flex on my team, and when he puts up a week like he did week 1, I'm super excited to see it. But if he also drops like a 2 or 3 point game, it's like, well, that's my last player chosen to play this week. It shouldn't kill me.
Yeah, and I guess me broadening it out taking away my reaction and more asking this back to Zach is, why don't you like any of the New York Giants players? Is it because of the team, the Giants? Is it you don't like the profiles of, Evan Ingram, of Daniel Jones, of Darius Slayton? Do those guys not fit your process? Because then that makes a lot of sense. Like, those guys don't really fit my process in terms of what I look for. I avoid that tier of quarterback. I either, try and get, one of Burrow or Tua or something like that, or if I can get one of those top 5 guys, then great. But I typically never do, and then I go old man QB. I just there's not enough differentiation between all those guys in the middle for me to invest in a young guy, and I'll just wait till Daniel Jones is 30, and if he's still in the league, I'll pick him up then. And then Ingram, durability, I don't know, never really looked like a tight end to me. Like, he's been great in fantasy when he plays, but I also don't spend a lot at tight end either. So, just didn't fit for me. But I just throwing that back to you, Zach. What is it about you that you're not maybe excited to have one of those players in your lineup?
Yeah, and looks like that offense is going to need to score a lot of points because the Giants suck. But sorry, I'm a Cowboys
that would
fan.
be the thing that I'm interested in. So I look for good offenses, and then offenses that are always playing from behind.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you'll see that a lot from the Giants this year,
unless you're the Jets.
Yeah, their counterpart across the pond. They play in the same stadium, right? So
yeah. All right. So Will Fuller, buy, sell, hold. I think that's up to you, and not as a cop-out answer. It's that I don't really believe in, buying high, buying low. I think it's always buying, and we judge it at the moment of, we judge it a day later. We judge it week 1, like in the case of trading Zeke for Miles Sanders. We judge it a year later, and it's a different answer every time sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, is this a player that's going to help you? Is it a player that fits your process? For me, it is neither of those. So he would not be a buy for me. He would probably be a hold until he goes off for a couple of weeks, because I think the volume is going to be there. Mm-hmm. And then sell him then.
Yeah, I pretty much buy into your answer there 100%. Not a player that I would have been targeting, or he isn't on many of my rosters. So if he is on my roster, it's because I bought him real cheap, or I, stuck him in somewhere on a deal. And so in that case, I'm pretty interested in selling. Or like you just said, Jeremy, maybe I even parlay it, wait a few weeks and see if he has a few more good weeks, and then sell it at the top, because I guarantee you he's not my wide receiver 3 or 4 on any team that I've got. So I'm ready to go with all the other wide receivers. And if he's going to crack my rotation and make it tough on me to make my lineup decisions, I'd rather sell him if everybody's interested.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. We're going to go into a different Zach. Zach Reed at Tacit Assassin 13. Don't know if any of you have ever heard of him, but
if you haven't.
He is an amazing guy. Been listening to him for years, and he's been very vocal about our podcast. We really appreciate all of those tweets and shout outs that he's given us. Pretty amazing. But
we need to get Zach on here. He's of the psychological kind of dynasty players, it's us and him and Leo Pasiga are kind of the people that always get thrown in to tweets when people are talking about it, and so we really need to get Zach on here.
I'd love it, and anytime, buddy, reach out to us. We're ready. In the meantime, you sent us several questions, and the first one we kind of talked about pre-show, and whether we should put it on this podcast or not. And it was kind of a unanimous hell yeah, because we're not just about football. We're here to help, any way we can. Question is life ? Parenting a 6-year-old who is self-aware enough to ask about his autism. Differential equations. Maybe the biggest struggle of all, figuring out how wrong I was on Josh Jacobs, or maybe accurately Gruden, Hollywood Brown, and Eckler's usage. Also Carolina. So there's a whole lot to unpack in that. Life crept in with the equation, and something that we all struggle with mental issues, whether we pretend we don't or not. And that's kind of one of those things that we like to unpack here. And I have a relative with that's on the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, and I contribute to that as much as I can. The IDP guys and doing their invitational, it's all about, actually, let's just go ahead and shout that out right here. Autism Speaks, right?
IDP guys, Autism Speaks.
Let's handle these mental problems with being outward about it. And so
there shouldn't be a stigma around it either. Like, it's a shame that we had to even talk pre-show about whether or not we should include that. Like, this shouldn't be something that's touchy to talk about. Certainly everyone's personal life is their personal life, but Zach sent this out to the Twitter world, and he was certainly proud to do that, and as he should be. And I've had, I have a relative on the spectrum, and I also have done a lot of work with, a family that has a child with Down syndrome over a number of years. And so, any of these kind of either neurological, developmental, chromosomal type things, it's awesome to just talk about and realize that this is, hopefully a really welcoming community, and certainly on this podcast, a welcoming place to talking about real life, because all the things that we're talking about are these processes that you can translate hopefully into your everyday life, and being honest and recognizing patterns and tracking your behaviors and altering them. These are all things that we do. I always say it, these are all things that we do in therapy. So do it as a listener and make it part of the conversation.
And DiffEQ, that's a ridiculously hard subject. One of the weed out classes for us engineering majors, not typically for psychology majors. They let them pass on that. They do math for psychology majors, where they talk about, do you know what the number 1 is? And they say yes, and they say, well, you pass. That's great. So
also called statistics and structural equation modeling and multi-level modeling, but
that stuff. No, but really differential equations, that was a tough class, but we don't need to go into that one as much as true biggest struggle of all, which is, why were you so wrong on Josh Jacobs? I mean, everybody else was right. And, that should make you really question yourself. But if not, you should really look at it and go, it was one game. And, the particular game really played out in the fact that now you have a coach that his design for a team is to not bother with, using the blocking running back, right? Like he's offense. So Carolina is going to be a different team.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's easy to be vocal, or it's, the degree to which you're vocal and feeling frustrated about this is, when you're wrong, especially if you were, outwardly against, drafting Josh Jacobs or drafting any Panthers or anything like that, then this hurts a little bit more for you. But I think that a good thing that we can do as, an exercise is to think about what we felt we knew was happening as things were playing out. So the Raiders, for instance, made all these moves that everyone reported as indicating that they did not want Josh Jacobs to be involved in the passing game. And we don't want to be too outcomes focused in terms of this analysis, but if we were to go back to then and say, okay, well, that is true that they're signing a bunch of pass catching backs and drafting Lynn Bowden and things like that, but let's look at the players that they were adding. They weren't necessarily adding like an Austin Eckler or a Kareem Hunt. They were adding well, Devontae Booker, I think, was later. They added maybe Riddick at some point. Maybe
Riddick
that was
got
last
cut, yeah.
year. They re-signed, what's his name? Jalen Richard.
Sure.
They drafted Lynn Bowden, but none of these names are scary toward really chipping into a workhorse running back. I know people liked Lynn Bowden, but that came and went over the course of the offseason. So, I think that maybe we should have looked at, sure, it looks like they're doing something, but, let's really challenge the validity of what we think is happening, because it, ended up being nothing, at least after 1 week.
Yeah, and the same, I think pretty much all of his questions in the same
Mm-hmm.
vein here, Hollywood Brown and Eckler, and, they're all of the same ilk. Let's not take a look at 1 week and determine our entire future off of 1 week. Let's just give it time, because this season is even more odd than most seasons. And I guarantee you, like, if you were to try to pick out of a crystal ball anywhere near the stats that came out of any first week, you would never be good at it. But
You would
this
have won the
year,
Millie Maker.
this
picked
year
it
was
right.
even more tough.
If you
So
picked it right, you would have won the Millie. I will just add a couple comments about Hollywood and Eckler and Carolina too, just real quickly. So Hollywood, for me, it's never been that he can't or won't have big games. It's consistency questions, it's size questions, it's durability questions that 1 week is not going to extinguish. If he has a couple of these weeks in a row, or is able to at least have a base floor of 12, 13 points, and then has these spike weeks later in the season, then okay, I'm more interested in having this conversation. But like, Deshaun Jackson has always had games like this, and I've never wanted to own him in Dynasty or fantasy. So he's a similar player, I think. Sure, he might have more. I don't know. Deshaun Jackson had a ton of talent. He still does. So I don't know. I'm, again, not reacting strongly to 1 week. I think he's a fine player, but he's not one that I'll own because of my concerns. For Eckler, really quickly, I'm a big Josh Kelly guy, so I've kind of been thinking that there may be more than him involved anyway. So I don't know. I'm not saying I told you so, because I could have totally seen Josh Kelly being nothing and Eckler being exactly what a lot of people thought he was going to be, but we'll see. We don't know. This is still an unsettled backfield that might be up and down all year. Carolina, I think I mentioned this on, briefly on our episode with Katie Flower, that, I think it's a combination of youthful excitement and Matt Rule. And we'll see how sustainable that is. If there's going to be a team that is rebuilding and not expected to do much during the season, but has an awesome first game and is really competitive, it's going to be this charismatically coached team with a bunch of youth, with a bunch of skill, but that's probably not sustainable with their defense and a quarterback that a lot of us like, and I think Teddy's good, but we'll see him for a full season and see how well that goes.
But in a nutshell, I think all of these rope into the same equation. And I think Zach's a smart man, and he was kind of leading us down that path of don't overreact, right?
Yeah.
Like, these kinds of things will play themselves out. And, I look at it like, I think what you're talking about is a great example. The Hollywood Brown. If you have him in your position and he is in your rotation, he's going to be your flex or your wide receiver 2 or whatever you have him at, you better leave him there, because as Jordan McNamara will say, you got to embrace the variance. You've got to understand that a player like that, his highs are going to win you weeks. His lows, you better hope they don't lose you weeks. You build your roster around the fact that you want his highs. And if that's not the way you construct a roster like you, Jeremy, you already have players that have a better floor. So you don't really want that variance as much, because your floor is so high that if the guy has a ceiling day, that it's so ridiculous that, nobody's going to beat you.
Yeah, exactly. And Zach had one other tweet here that he added on at the end. So how do you strike the balance between having a strong, well thought stance on a player and being blindsided by take lock? early season is a razor's edge between small sample size and the sunk cost fallacy. Really couldn't have said it better myself. You can see that he's psychologically minded and thinking that way. And we've had conversations about this, but I think that this sheds a little bit more light for me in terms of thinking about entering the season. If there's a player that there's going to be players like Michael Thomas and Nuke Hopkins and guys that just like, regardless of how their season goes, we're not really going to question them. We're not going to move them around a ton. We're not going to worry about them very much. And if they blow up, that's what we kind of expect them to do anyway. If there's players where there's potential volatility or there are strong opinions and you're on one side of it, like a N'Keal Harry, like a Corey Davis, it might be good going into the season to say, okay, what is my expected reaction if things go really well? Am I never going to sell them because now I'm locked into this guy I really loved and wanted him to work out? And then the other side of that is, how do I prevent myself from looking at this as just sunk cost? And how do I, is it going to take a full year? Am I seeing out this whole year and just not moving him unless he hits? Or is it like, okay, if he hasn't hit by week 3, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks and then I'm just going to cash out for anything I can get. Like, I think an honest analysis of that, internally, before things get going too far. Like, you can still do it after week 1 or week 2 or, early in the season. I think it's important to just try and take a step back and be as honest as possible with what you'd be willing to take at this moment. What's your bottom dollar, and when do you need to pull that trigger if you can?
That's perfectly stated. And, I think we talked about a lot of this. I think really Zach's questions kind of were all fairly related, right? Like, how do we really truly take honest stock into what we have and not overreact within the moment? And, the answer is to have a plan before it happens. And I think that you stated that very eloquently, Jeremy, that if you know what your plan is, you can kind of look at it and you go, well, doesn't look like it's going the way I wanted it to. Well, here's my floor of what I'd sell the guy for. Here's my expected, like, here's what I want. And if you get offers within that range, or if you offer people within that range, you're already happy with the outcome, right? So the next question comes from
Last question.
It is our last question. Comes from across the globe with a buddy of mine in Belgium, in Tim Breemersch. I think I said that right. At Tim, and that's at TIIM.
It's like you caught a Belgian beer in there somewhere in the pronunciation.
What's funny is
Breemersch Belgian beer, Mitch.
Oh man, I'm telling you, that Dutch language and everything that's over there, it's one of the most difficult alphabets you can ever learn. The 2 vowels together make a different vowel sound than 2 vowels separated from each other. And they're smarter than us over here in our language. So it's amazing. I went over there in 2009. I absolutely love that country. And we've talked a lot about beers. This guy's a great connoisseur of beer. But he has a question for us. So let's talk about this.
Yep.
I won, but I didn't win big enough to call myself a contender and make win now moves when I wasn't planning to contend before the season. What does that look like? Like, this Devi team that he gave us a link to and showed us his roster, he wasn't expecting to contend, but now he's looking at it. He's somewhat contending, but he has strength coming in. When do you decide? And it's similar to what we asked earlier. How do you know whether to go all in or whether to continue with your original plan?
Well, I mean, you don't know, but I think he's already being honest with himself at the beginning, saying, well, he won, but he didn't win big enough to really feel like he's a contender. So he's already kind of started this self-analysis. I would say, what would happen? Tim, would you feel differently if the next 2 weeks went the exact same way, where you barely win games? You're 3-0. Are you gonna feel differently? Or are you gonna feel in this same spot? if you're not going to feel any better, then I would, kind of stick with your plan that you were, going in, and don't change much of it. Continue to build for the future. And, you'll still be in good shape, and, see if you can squeak out a couple more wins. But if you really feel like you're a strong contender after those, and, you feel like you can make a push and you have the assets to push without really jeopardizing what you're trying to do too much, then, I don't have any problem going for that either.
It looks like, just analyzing that roster, that he took a few flyers on some of the youngsters, and it was just like he hit on them all. Like the youth that he aimed for that are currently in the NFL are strong, and they're all strongly performing, but the sample size is small. It's only 1 week.
Very small.
And this is very similar to what I was talking about earlier in this episode, where I had a team that I didn't build to contend, and then they ended up contending, right? And so like I had a good team, and then now here my first week, like, all right, now I lost this first week of this first year, and I'm in the opposite realm of what Tim's saying. Like, do I overreact? Do I start selling people and build for the future, even though this was supposed to be the year I was building for, and I already did that? And I know my roster is solid, but my team sucked in the first week. So will it get better? I hope so. And that's what I'm planning on.
Yeah, and this is making me think that when we do another listener question episode, which we will, I think, some point in the future, I think it'll be valuable to do two things. One, take in new questions from these guys and other Dynasty players, but also try, since we know a lot of these guys that contributed, follow back up with them, whether it be week 6 or week 9 or end of the season, or all those time points, and see what their feelings are on this original question that they had, and really, track that analysis over time and see, compare not only with the outcomes, but how that may have changed in the weeks that followed their question.
I like that. That ends up concluding all of our listener questions. I think that Tim's question, we didn't really go in wax as poetic as we did with some of the others, but the question was great, and the answer was, I think, given in most of the ones before that. In that, let's calm it down. Let's take more than a week. Congrats that your badass team did great this week. After 2 or 3 weeks, let's take a look at this thing again and see.
Yeah, and Tim can go first next time, so that he gets the wax poetic, and doesn't get his question answered in other questions. All right. Well, that was fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing listener questions, getting engagement from our listeners. Speaking of our listeners, we're going to be posting here shortly, probably by the time this episode is out, that we are going to be giving away some of our great koozies that we had made. They all have the Dynasty SelfHelp logo on them. The other side, there's 2 versions. One has the hot cushion logo, and the other has our basic therapy setup with me and then Kyle on the couch. So we'd love to give those away to some of our listeners. We just ask that you follow our accounts and subscribe to us on YouTube, and give us a little rating and review, and send that to us. And there's a good chance that you'll acquire one of those. So we're excited about that. Really excited that we're developing a nice listener base, and it's good times rolling for the Dynasty Self-Help podcast.
We certainly appreciate all the questions. They were amazing. It was fun to talk about them, and we kind of pre-showed a little bit about what we were going to talk about, and it's amazing how in depth you can get into some of these things, and how we've all been there. We can all share these experiences and help each other get through them. So that's a lot of what we are here to help you guys with, is our experiences, but also, help you understand yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take the reins over real quick here, and I'm going to squeeze in our exercise that we're going to do. So no hot cushion today, but we're going to do a little word association exercise. So Kyle, I'm going to read you a list of, I think they're all nouns. Yeah, they're all nouns. I think so. Yeah, they're all nouns. We'll go with that. and we are going to just have you give your immediate word association response, whether it be, maybe a word, maybe a very short phrase. I don't want you thinking too quick or too long about these. So I'm just going to kind of rapid fire these, and then we'll do a little follow-up to it, okay?
So you want me to give you a word back or a
Yes.
sentence? Okay, a word.
Yeah, preferably a word or a couple word phrase rather than a sentence.
Perfect.
Okay, as brief as possible, as quick as possible.
I'm
Are
ready.
you ready? Okay. Football.
College.
Banana.
Daughter.
Gibson.
Hopeful.
Oklahoma.
Boomer.
Meat.
Food.
Baker.
Maybe.
Hockey.
Stars.
Analytics.
Perfection.
QB7.
QB1.
Beer.
Vitamin B.
Bacon.
Meh.
Injury.
Prone.
Orange.
Burns my skin.
Flag.
United States.
Chef.
Borgia, Borgia, Borgia.
Signal.
Collar.
Helmet.
Under the.
Superflex.
Perfection.
Farm.
My life.
Starbucks.
Star. What do they call it? They burn the crap out of their beans. That one. Charbucks. They call it Charbucks. Yeah.
Film.
Media.
Mouse.
Pest.
Couch.
Potato.
Mother.
Daughter.
Lamb.
Dinner.
Water.
Future beer.
Golf.
Fun.
Wide receiver 12.
Man, that one's a tough one. I started thinking names instead
Just
of
go.
actually. All right.
Say a word.
Wide receiver 1.
Beard.
Style.
Trade.
Fun.
Tight end 15.
Not on my roster.
Thought you were going to say tight end 1. ACL.
Story of my life.
Winter.
Doesn't exist.
Buy.
Window of opportunity.
Sell.
Never.
Athlete.
Football.
Twitter.
Rigmarole.
Lost.
Really bad TV show.
ADP.
Value.
Eagles.
Terrible.
Donuts.
Don't like them.
Koozie.
Beautiful.
Truther.
First to the ball.
Regret.
Daily.
Value.
Exists.
Touchdown.
Win.
Draft.
Fun.
And Dallas.
Cowboys.
All
Should have
right.
said Stars. Oh, why are the Cowboys first on my mind when the Stars play tomorrow?
You seem a little exasperated. Was that
That
a
was
mental?
fun.
Yeah.
It was tough. No, I mean, like some of them were tough, you know.
Yeah. You found a nice groove there, and then something threw you off.
Yeah, we'll go back and look at it, but one of them threw me off, and it was wide receiver 12, and I was thinking Allen Robinson, and I couldn't think of his name, and it flustered me because I wanted to say Allen Robinson because he's kind of like my quintessential borderline wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, and I couldn't think of his name, and I got it, and I got stuck.
You couldn't think of him because he's more like wide receiver 7, or, if we're talking just this year, wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so I just said wide receiver 1 because I knew that he was your wide receiver 1 in your hot takes.
So that's okay. So you went from wide receiver 12 to Allen Robinson, but you actually associated wide receiver 1 with him. So
I associated your take on him, yeah. So I got there and I was able to say it, but that wasn't really what I wanted to say was wide receiver 1. I wanted to say Allen Robinson.
All right. Let me ask you one more thing. So now tell me about the last trade you made.
Let's see. The last trade I made, that would be in my Shark Tank 2 league. I traded a player that I probably shouldn't have for far too little. And we will talk about this on one of our diary episodes, I'm sure, because it's actually been the part of at least 2 of those. But I made a trade for Matt Ioannidis for a small amount of money, small amount of bankroll.
I see. All right. Okay, so let's just tell me some of the words that I read to you that come to mind. So we talked already about wide receiver 12. What are some other ones that are coming to mind for you, and why? Let's just start with what they are. Okay, football.
Yeah, I mean that one sticks in my mind because
let's go rapid fire before we go into why.
Okay, man, I'm struggling to remember back. I was so hyper focused on answering them.
I know, and then hyper focused on talking about your trade. That's
right.
The whole point.
Yeah, no, that's tough for me to remember back even that short amount of time to those little things that were happening. You said Dallas, and I said Cowboys, and I really wish I just said Stars.
Continue. What else?
Let's see. You said Orange, which is awful. It's terrible, and I don't believe in it. First off, because I don't see colors, but I just know it's orange because it burns my skin.
I don't need analysis, just words.
Well, I'm trying to buy time, sir.
I know. No stalling. This is how we do cognitive tests. You're not doing very well.
I'm doing pretty good. It's like 2 hours of podcasting we've been doing. So,
gotten 4 recalled out of a list of like 40 words.
Yeah, I'm not doing so good.
For a genius.
Well, I tell you, I wasn't expecting this one, so I wasn't ready for that one.
Well, that's the point. 2 more. Come up with 2 more that
you said tight end 17.
Tight end 15.
15. Tight end 15. Let's see. You said touchdown.
I did. All right, so we'll stop there. So you got wide receiver 12, which we talked a little bit about why you remembered that. Then you said football, Dallas, which is kind of funny because that was the first and last word that I read, which cognitively makes sense because we talk about primacy and recency. So primacy is what happened first. It's easier to remember because it's the first thing that we stored. And recency, we talk about recency bias, but it's the most recent thing or most chronologically current thing that occurred. And then orange, I already know why you said orange. You talked about it being colorblind. I also think you might have said bad.
No, because it burns my skin.
Oh, burns skin because of Texas, right?
Yes. I told my daughter, and she actually believed it until she was about 5 years old, that the color orange actually burns my skin.
There you go. And then tight end 15. Why did you remember that?
It was just a funny one. Popped in my head. I'll remember all of these, and I'm going to text you, by the way. Like every time I remember one for the next 2 days, whatever it is, I don't care.
Unsubscribe. Unsubscribe already.
I'll wake up at 3 a.m. I'll be like, oh, there's one of them. And I'll just text you the word. Like it's forever going to be burnt into my brain.
There you go. All right. And then the last one you said was touchdown. Why did you remember touchdown?
That one just popped in there. I don't know. It's just one of the fun ones you said, like, what do you relate touchdown to?
Yeah. So then I want to pick out a couple that I thought were somewhat interesting from what I can remember. Bacon, you said
Meh.
something. Yeah, you said meh. Why?
Yeah,
Is that because you don't like it?
it, pork is okay. I mean, it's not the best meat in the world, and bacon's one of those things that people love, 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 and I just kind of
Tastes
like it.
pretty good.
It's
Yeah.
it's I
All
kind of
right.
like it, so I said meh.
All right. Banana, you said daughter, I think.
Yeah, my daughter eats fruit like going out of
She,
style, so
she's a fruit ninja.
yeah, she is.
Gotcha.
So she just ate like 6 bananas in the last 2 days, so it was
Yeah.
fresh in my brain.
I learned that you hate Starbucks.
Yeah, Charbucks. I mean, I used to like Starbucks. We met some really cool people there, but once I really got into coffee and you know people who are artisans making and roasting their own coffee beans, like I can't go back. I mean, Starbucks will do in a pinch. It
Mm-hmm.
tastes like coffee, but
Yep.
there are people that make great coffee.
Yep. Mother, I was hoping for something maybe a little bit deeper. It
Then daughter,
it made sense.
right?
That's how your daughter occurred.
Yeah.
Um, and ACL, you said story of your life.
Yeah, well, it's like I always choose the player that gets injured. So,
Okay. I thought it might have been personal experience.
no, I've had a lot of other injuries and a lot
I
of
mean, it
other,
is personal experience, but
yeah,
it's personal
personal
dynasty
experience.
experience. Yeah.
Not, yeah, it's from my fantasy
Who
football
who
experience.
have you chosen that always? What group of players always tears their ACL?
It's not specific to a category of players. It's typically that one guy on my roster that was a quintessential supposed to be starter.
Gotcha.
That's typically like somebody on the starting lineup, not
Sure.
somebody who is on the peripheral.
That's right. All right, and we won't talk about hockey or the Stars because go Blues. All right, well that was fun. That I didn't know how that was going to go, but it was fun to one, exhaust you, 2, hear our answers, 3, see you squirm and struggle over some of them, 4, see you squirm and struggle even more when you could only remember 5 of them and they happen to fit perfectly into psychological processes of particularly difficult ones or ones that weren't really even words. They were more numbers, so they stood out. And then, of course, the first and last. And yeah, just overall, just kind of a fun little thing to do and show on this listener episode the things that I was acutely listening for.
Well, that was pretty fun. Like I said, you'll get some text from me at 2 a.m. when I wake up and be like, "Oh yeah, this one. You said this word, and my answer was this." It'll be fun, and then you can fact check me.
I've already changed my phone number.
All right. Well, I'm looking up at the clock, and it looks like you're tapping your notebook, and that's
I'm already
why
walking
I
out
looked
the
at
door.
the clock. Yeah, you are personally changing your cell phone number. I see you actually threw the burner phone in the trash can. That makes more sense. So, in the meantime, though, man, this was a fun show. And can you tell everybody where they can find us?
Yeah, of course. So you can find us on Twitter at Dynasty SelfHelp. You can listen to this podcast probably wherever you're listening to it now, as well as other platforms. So you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, our YouTube to watch us on video, as well as see some of our hot cushion segments and other little tidbits that we have from other segments. You can follow the rest of us on Twitter. Follow Rich, our producer, at Streaming Rich. Follow Kyle at Dogleg Brewer. Follow me at Jared Schwob. And we will see you next time.